Hello, this is POGO 511, Introductory Data Analysis for Policy and Government. This is video 6, Scales. Please take a moment to connect with the outcomes as a result of watching this video. The information that will be reviewed today in this video is related to variables and scales. This is a very important video to understand how variables come together when collecting data from participants, but also when analyzing data. There are specific statistical tests that are more appropriate with different types of variables. So this is intended to be a quick primer on the different definitions of these variables. So let's go ahead and jump in. Scales are the collection of attributes that are used to measure a specific variable. So as you can see here, there are 4 scales of measurement. They include nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Let me go ahead and just see if I can get my little pointer here so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. So there are 4 scales of measurement, and they're located here on the left-hand side: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. And each of these are utilized within instruments, surveys, assessments to gather information. And they're going to be described further on the slides that are following. So the nominal are named variables. Ordinal are named and ordered variables. So there's a specific hierarchy that they are presented. Interval variables are named, ordered, and there's a proportional interval between variables. So I love to think about these in terms of like your household income. So we know that if you did it in increments of 25,000, let's say, is your household income 25,000 per year, or 50,000 per year, or 75,000, or 100,000? You know that as those numbers increase, that means that it's a higher level of household income. You also know that there's a proportional amount in between 25,000 and 50,000 and 75,000. So that's what that means by proportionate interval between variables. And then ratio variables are really just like interval, but they can accommodate an absolute 0. So as you saw in my previous example there, when talking about interval variables, I didn't include a household income of 0, did I? But if you're utilizing a ratio variable, you could include those same increments of household income, 25, 50, 75, and 100,000, but you'd also want to have an answer option of 0 to make that a ratio variable. So let's go ahead and jump into learning a little bit more about each of these. I believe I have them in the same order that appears here. So we'll begin with nominal and work our way down to ratio. So nominal are those named variables. They exhibit no ordering among the categories. And one example that you'll typically see within some kind of survey or measurement when you're asking demographic information may be, well, where do you live? Or where is the organization located? That's a question that doesn't exhibit any ordering among the categories. We know that West and Southwest, there's no ordering between those two. I mean, we may have preferences. We may like LA a little bit better than Austin, but there's no ordering among the categories. So when you're thinking about states, these would be an example of a nominal level scale. They're also called categorical or discrete variables. When you think about ordinal variables, these are questions that can be asked that there is ordering among the categories, but there's no exact distances between those categories. So an example could be utilizing an agreement scale. We know that strongly disagree may be the most unfavorable response on this scale, and strongly agree may be the most favorable. But we don't really know how much the distance is per se between strongly disagree and disagree. We know that strongly disagree is less favorable or unfavorable of an answer choice, but we don't really know, like in a quantifiable way, how far is a strongly disagree answer option compared to disagree, or even a strongly disagree option compared to neutral? We do in fact know that there is an ordering among those choices, among those categories, but we don't know the exact distances between those categories. So as I shared, Likert scales are an example of ordinal scales. These are also called categorical or discrete variables. And you'll see that the example shared here is from some kind of engagement survey, potentially like reaching out to customers to say, would you recommend this brand? I've had a positive experience with this brand. I would purchase from this brand again. So this is something that you may see from a customer service type of survey. The next, we have those interval variables, as you might recall from our previous slide. So I'll just scoot back here. These are those named and ordered and proportional intervals between variables. So I love using the household income or your salary as an example, knowing that there is both order and distance between those categories. Income is a great example of a ratio level variable that is measured in actual dollars, and potentially if you have your answer options that are $25,000 increments from each other, that would be an example of a proportional variable in between those different categories. Interval level scales are called continuous variables because they're on a scale. We know that 75 is higher than 50 and 50 is higher than 25. So those are considered continuous variables. And finally, the only difference between an interval and a ratio variable is that ratio variables, have a true zero. So in this case, in your survey instrument or your measure where you're asking a demographic question related to personal income or household income, you would have an answer option of 0 to make that variable a ratio variable. Similar to interval variables, ratio level scales are also considered continuous variables. So as a quick review, we've learned about 4 different scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. I do want you to know that some exhibit ordering among the categories. A nominal variable is an example of that. However, other variables such as ordinal or interval variables do suggest some kind of hierarchy or more favorable response than another. In the case of ordinal variables, we don't know specifically the distance between those two categories. It's not something that is quantifiable if you're just using a narrative answer option like strongly agree or agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. Whereas in interval variables, you do see an example of both order and distance among categories, making it a continuous variable. And ratio variables are just like interval, except that they have absolute 0 as an answer option. So when you think about the program that you're interested in studying for the course of the semester, what variables may be of interest to the program that you're interested in? What information might they like to collect information on their participants or clients? Or if you're interested in doing like a multi-site study where you are working with a health organization that has multiple organizations across the United States, what types of demographic questions might you need to include to ensure that you're capturing the appropriate demographic information of participants at a site in the Southwest or West or Midwest or Southeast? If you're interested in collecting data from across the country, how might you need to construct your measure, your instrument, to ensure that you're collecting data from all of the sites across the country? And in that case, you would include some nominal variables within your instrument. So I want you to think through the programs that you're interested in, the variables and other data that may be available for analysis or that you would want to include as new data to be collected within your study. Certainly reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help.